Okay, the Air Force was pressed into service of having a CIO. The department stood those up right around the time of the apocalypse that never happened. You know it as Y2K. I came to the headquarters of FMC in April of 2000. April 1st, I was a April Fool's Day present to the commander there, and nothing had happened. There was no big explosion. All the databases did not sink into the floors of the data centers. And the problem really at that time then was to switch to a perspective of business value. Klinger-Cohen really started to set the stage for knowing what your IT expenditures were. And I spent the next several years in strategic planning and then in the CTO and CIO jobs. And in that CIO job, I was confronted with the fact I had no idea what the IT spend of the largest command in the Air Force was. Because the way the budgets in the Air Force are allocated, they go to those cylinders of excellence. So finance spends money for finance systems. Maintenance spends money for maintenance systems. The supply people spend money for supply systems. The administrative arm of the Air Force spends money to administer and comply with document requirements, content management systems, those sorts of things. As I began to look at that process, what I found was there were over 600 recognizable systems. Recognizable meaning every year $1 million or more was spent to maintain them, right? So that's 612 million, and we're just getting started. And there were many, many more unrecognizable systems. They were below the thresholds that the Air Force considered as a capital investment, which at that time was $100,000 a year. And as a result, they were really not findable. So my first job in that situation was to build a portfolio management system. There really wasn't one in the DoD, there wasn't one in the Air Force, and here I am in a little backwater command in Ohio, building an information management systems management capability, portfolio management capability, that grew to the scale it had to run on a Teradata platform. It's called the Enterprise Information Technology Repository. It's used at the DoD level today, because they didn't have anything else. And it's tracking all the information systems, network spending, et cetera, for the Department of Defense. The problem was I didn't control any of that money. Remember, it's all in those highly polished centers of excellence. So even though those applications were the business side's weapons with which they fought their supply chain role or their maintenance role, everybody was on their own, and those silos are busy building duplicate capabilities and overlapping information. So as a result, once we started building this IT repository, we began to see the conflicts of interest between the functions. And the DoD is immediately coming out when they start to see this from our work and saying the IT community has to put governance in place, architecture-based, some sort of governance has to be instituted. Well, they took two shots at that. I don't know if this sounds familiar at all in the business world, but they decided that the first way to wrestle everybody into submission was to consolidate in massive data centers. Never been done before, right? So they tried to come up with this hardware-based approach, and they created the Global Combat Support System, great name for the business systems of the Air Force, which was a place in each of the services where all the business applications would be put into place. And you can see the DoD thought, well, okay, that kind of gets everybody in one place. We can see what's going on. The functional community started asking the question, well, now, who's paying for me to move my systems from where they are down there? Remember, this is my money in finance or in maintenance. And of course, the answer was, not me, I'm not doing that. So that migration was very reluctant, very great deal of hysteresis in getting anything in there. I think at the time I left the CIO job, we had about 6 of the major platforms had migrated in 3 years. If you ran your business that way, that would be a tremendous time lag. 3 years would be, many, many business cycles, many, many inventory turns, depending on what you do. In the government, that's really 1.5 budget cycles. For the biennial budget process, if you tell me to do something, I really can't do it for 2 years, because it takes me that long to go into the funding process to get the resources to do what you tell me to do. So 3 years wasn't terribly irrational. Well, but 3 years was plenty of time for the DoD folks to think of another answer. Well, if we can't get them to migrate the legacy systems, let's blow them all up and let's do something called an ERP. How many people have had a successful ERP implementation in their company in your lifetime? Raise your hand. Really? Okay, that's 0.1% of the people in the room. That's more than normal. In just sitting in Dayton, Ohio, I watched 3 major companies, AT&T, NCR class companies, fail at putting in just the financial components out of an ERP. So I'm scared to death when I hear this one. Well, if we build a big enough common database, everything will be okay. You can put all your processes in there. All you got to do is get a big hammer and jam them in there so they fit. Remember, this is the Department of Defense. We're not selling, beach balls at Walmart for a living. We're not a supply chain company of the conventional ilk. The people who make our stuff disappear 2 years after they make it. We don't have long-term supplier relationships to worry about in most cases, unless it's big platform providers. So how are you going to make this work? What are you going to do? Well, in the DoD, everybody started their own ERP. So you had the Navy, but they didn't build one Navy ERP. Every major subordinate component, highly polished cylinders of weapon system excellence, built their own ERP. Are we making progress? They wound up with 5, I think. All on SAP, that's a good start. At least they're all the same brand. The Army went about its business. I think they built 5, but I'm pretty sure only 4 of them actually still work. And the Air Force launched off on the one variant out of the whole SAP pile to implement an Oracle ERP. And as I put it there, they flew at high speed for 10 years and then impacted the ground through what's called pilot error in the service. When you have an accident, the guy driving is at fault. Well, the Air Force really was guilty of pilot error. We did 6 pilots of various phases in the course of building out this system. The first pilot failed, and I got to give you a quick hint of what the scope was. We manage our vehicle fleet with an ERP called Maximo. Anybody know Maximo? Pretty popular, works pretty good. Just had been upgraded to be web-based. So we decided the first pilot of using an ERP was to replace another ERP. But that's okay, now that it's failed, and we're rebaselining the program, we've decided that the restart will start by replacing an ERP in the MRO world called Impreza. The company's gone out of business now. You probably don't see that marketed today. And we're going to go replace Impreza with our Oracle MRO. So we're really not putting our foot very deep in the water in the Air Force. Let me just put it that way. We're replacing one ERP with another. We've been at it for 5 years to do 3 good years' work. Realize, though, that you're trying to put an ERP on top of a system of expenditures, supply chains, and maintenance that would probably qualify somewhere around 10th or 12th economy in the world. $75 billion in appropriations every year. Okay, that's the kind of money management that you've got to build into your ERP. So it's not trivial.